I'd say something.
So do you think there's some responsibility on the person being bullied to speak up for themselves before they let it go so far where I'm going to snap and do something violent?
I think there is, yes.
Is there anything you found when people are getting bullied, any kind of pattern or change of behavior of becoming more quiet, certain physical things that they're doing differently that we could notice, that if anybody's going through that, we know something bad's going on?
Well, I will say that we studied both guys and girls bullying-wise, and girls reported much more bullying than guys did. And I think part of that is guys usually, the guys that are getting bullied are usually by themselves, and there's groups that are bullying them and could essentially say, if you tell anybody, or as you mentioned, like narc on them, I think that they would say, like, we will physically harm you or others. And I think that's when they become more quiet and kind of shy away from everybody and try and stay like in their own little hole. Whereas girls, I think, in a way, feel more comfortable going to administration or someone like a counselor for help. And I think they're much more open about what's going on than guys are.
And there's probably like a sense of, well, there is a sense of pride. As a guy, you don't want to feel weak and that you can't do something about it, and coming to a counselor can appear that way, but if you're in that situation getting bullied that much or that often, you need to do something about it, whether that's on your own or going to a guidance counselor.
You guys find it interesting that the same type of behavior, if you're part of the herd or if you're outside of the herd, how it's perceived? You know, we talked about, I think about the guys I've been friends with for 30 years, and if we didn't know each other, if we were all outside the herd, someone might say it's bullying. Same way with the conversations you guys have, right? But it's not, because we're friends, we love each other, and we're busting chops. But when you're outside the herd, and then the herd is coming after you, and now it's painful, right? It's it goes from being something that's fun within the group to something that's really hurtful and really painful to those outside the group. It's almost like a switch that's been flipped, right? You guys saying it to each other doesn't bother you because you guys are all buddies. But you say it to somebody else, that kid who's weaker, smaller, looks different, whatever it might be, how they perceive it,
I think one of the factors would be how long you've known each other. Because I feel like if you're new, building a new relationship or whatever, if you've just met them recently, I think that if you start talking that way, they're definitely going to take it in a harmful manner, and they're definitely going to feel hurt, and they'll feel like you don't like them or you want to push them down, and they feel like they're getting bullied. Whereas I feel like if you've known each other for a while, I feel like you could talk it out and definitely say, like, I didn't mean it in that way, or something to that instance.
We think you get to a certain point, though. You think about like your friendship. You've been friends your whole lives. Something that you might say to each other, it's not even remotely thought of as being an insult or a bullying. It's just like, that's just what we do because we're friends.
Yeah.
But again, that outsider, the same comments, absolutely bullying, right?
Right, you might just like want to put yourself in their shoes and see how they see it if y'all haven't been friends long or not at all really. See how they might perceive it, because they might find something you say offensive to what it'd never be offensive if you're just friends.
Right.
In your research, did you guys come up with any specific prevention programs that the school ought to look at?
Yes. There's a OAS prevention program, and it has a bunch of stats on like what we can do to help and like to do in certain situations and what adults can do to help.
What are some of those things? You know the program, but what does it do?
So it reduces existing bullying problems among students and prevents new bullying problems, so it's ways they can help fix it.
How?
Are there specifics?
How do they do that, Baylor? Is it something they do in the classroom? What do they do in that program?
I think it's stuff they can do in the classroom and even out with like different groups they can make, and people can come together that relate to the same thing instead of having all different sorts of people spread out, so they can really just come together and talk about the same thing, and they all have like the same mindset about it.
Let me ask it this way, if you guys are in charge, you had complete carte blanche, how would you stop any further bullying that would ever occur here at LCA? What would you do? What program would you put in place?
I think I would probably get the students together and make them feel comfortable going to a counselor or seeking admission help. As far as, I think it's kind of hard to stop the cyberbullying part of the aspect because you can't really control a kid's social media. But face to face, I think you can control that by giving the kid like complete comfort in going and letting administration know that they're being bullied and they feel hurt and they need help.
What can we as an administration do to help that be the case, that it isn't already being done?
I think they can show a positive interest and make the kid feel welcome as well. And I think, I don't really know, just like make them feel welcome with them.
Just to show that the teachers and administrations care about their students, which here I think is awesome, because I feel like every teacher I've ever had truly does care and love for me.
Yeah.
So I've always felt that comfortness to go to and talk about it.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Do you think it helps to talk about the issue?
I think it does. I think it helps, especially sitting down. I think just find someone you're comfortable with, whether that be your parents or whether that be a teacher, for instance.
Well, I didn't mean like with an adult, but just sort of talk about the issue in general among the student body to let them know that we're aware that this goes on even in a place like this, and even maybe having some people share their stories. It might be surprised to know that certain people may have experienced similarly.
Like a chapel seminar or something along
Mhm.
those lines.
Do you find that helpful at all?
I think it would be, because the more you can confront the issue, the more comfortable people are going to feel to come out and say they have an issue.
But would you take it seriously? I mean, I see some of you, not you particular, in chapel. Do you think students would take it seriously?
I think through testimonies, yes. I think if someone just went up there and talked, I would not, honestly. But I think if you had certain students come up and give their testimony and how they were hurt, I think that would grab a student's attention.
How they hurt and maybe how they came through it on the
Yeah.
other side, and
And like
you know, how I dealt with it
yeah.
without picking up a gun.
Yeah.
There's reactive and proactive. Reactive, we wait till something's done, and all of a sudden we have a gunman in the school. Proactive, you all see something happening, and this cyberbullying, I mean, that can go fast. I mean, in a weekend, it could totally flip someone's life
Yeah.
through people piling on. And again, to be proactive, at what point do you see that and let someone know? Do you let a parent know? How would you suggest you intervene with cyberbullying?
I think if you see it definitely more than once, you definitely have to, I'd recommend going to your parent, or someone you feel comfortable talking to that topic about, and saying like, this and this is like hurting me and like making me like feel bad about myself. And I think that's a big thing people aren't doing nowadays. They're just not feeling comfortable going to other people. And I think that's one thing we have to help like make happen.
Do you think parents have to understand that if their child comes to them about cyberbullying or something happening on the phone, the student might think, well, my parents can take the phone away. And there needs to be comfort with the parents to know that their child is doing the right thing.
I think yes, and even in, we reviewed the LCA handbook policy, and it even mentioned confiscating the phone and seeing the persistent patterns of the potential cyberbullying that had occurred. And I think that is the best way, just to like let go of the negative stuff and give it to them and let them not deal with it, but let them see what's going on
Mhm.
and have another view coming in.
Guys, can you speak to some of the short-term and long-term consequences of being bullied? It goes beyond just having a bad day at school. So can you speak to some of the short-term and long-term consequences of being bullied? Not
Students who experience bullying are at an increased risk for poor school adjustment, sleep difficulties, anxiety and depressions, and bullied students indicate that bullying has a negative effect on how they feel about themselves, obviously their self-esteem and relationships with friends, and physical health can be weakened.
One of the things that we had researched was, especially you see it through high school, where kids who are bullied tend to be skip school where they can avoid that bullying, and also tend to drop out where they just want to completely avoid the situation and get out of whatever situation they're in.
But that's where cyberbullying becomes an even bigger problem, right?
Yeah, where they can reach you there too. And
Right.
I think that's where it's kind of hard to kind of find that solution where you can completely stop cyberbullying as a whole. But I think it's easier to stop it face to face than it is cyber.
Is there something, so, and I will confess, I'm on no social media, so I may butcher this question, or it may be an ignorant question. But in your groups, or when you're responding to somebody's Instagram post or something like that, or somebody's chat or snap, or you see something that somebody else has said, do you have any responsibility, or would you feel comfortable saying, hey, that's not cool? To respond like that, or I don't know, whatever your lingo is today, but to respond to the person who made the inappropriate comment or is making the inappropriate comment, so that the person who feels bullied doesn't feel like they're all alone.
I think you might, whether that be like publicly, like send it, like post it on their page, or you could
Or,
send them a
and
direct
I don't, and
message.
again, I don't know how it works, but do you get to respond to other people's
Yeah,
comments?
you can.
Could you or would you do that?
I think you could do that, or, I mean, there's options of like direct
Good.
messaging,
Okay,
where you could like either screenshot it or say like, I saw that rude comment, don't let that bother you, and pick them up and encourage them.
okay, so either go to the person who was feeling bullied, or rather than talking to the person who made the comment saying, don't do that, or, yeah.
Or both, right?
Yeah,
Both might be good.
yeah.
Would you feel out of place by stepping in and doing that?
I think I would feel more comfortable doing it through like a direct message rather than like,
Publicly.
Yeah,
rather than like
right.
publicly. I think
Yeah.
picking them up individually, I think I would feel comfortable with. I don't know about like, I actually said like replying to a rude comment and saying, like, hey, that's not cool. Like, try and say it on there. Whereas I feel like it'd be a deeper meaning if you could send them individually and something like that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about groups of athletes here, or all the athletes here coming together and saying, you know what, LCA athletes against bullying, and we're gonna pull together to make sure that this doesn't happen anymore. There's a lot of the videos that have gone viral now, right?
Yeah.
There was a young lady with special needs who was getting picked on, and it was like the basketball team and it was the football team, and it was all kind of rallied around her. And I'm watching this thing, it was balling, right? I mean, it was so awesome to see these young men and women rally around this young lady. And all she wanted to do was be on the cheerleading squad. And there was a group that was, making fun of her. These guys were like, no, this is wrong. This is wrong. And I just thought it was so cool that that group was banded together. I mean, do you think it kind of starts like, because a lot of times we look up to the athletes as leaders, right? So if a group of influential young men and women banded together to say, this isn't right, and we're not going to tolerate it. Self-police kind of, right?
I think that's a great idea, because what you said, people look up to athletes, and any kind of athlete has leaders and people who they look up to. So I think as athletes, we could do that, and I think it'd be pretty effective.
I think that's one cool thing about LCA is you really don't see much bullying going on in the teams, or any of the teams that I've really heard of. But I think the teams could join together, and because I think the athletic teams pretty much all around the board at LCA are pretty respected. So I think that people would respond to that and feel like, oh, they're cool, if you will. But like, I want to follow them, and I want to. I don't want to bully. I want to be like them. So I think that people would actually join together and follow that.
And like, as there are way more, I think there's definitely more athletes in the school than there is non, so you could have like a bunch of people that could like invest in helping others and building up others when they might need it.
Think about the awesome power that you guys have, but the awesome responsibility. I think growing up, I was an athlete, and I think about some of the guys I played with, they were some of the biggest bullies in our school. We didn't do a good job of self-policing. But you guys, especially here at LCA, I mean, like, what's in your heart? And it's like, you guys see it from a different perspective. You guys have a different vantage point. And you guys know that, to be a bully is inherently wrong. And, so I appreciate a lot of your answers and that mindset that you guys are saying, hey, you know what, we can band together. Because, man, being on the other end of that, it's no place anyone wants to be. And you certainly don't want to be the person dishing it out.
Have you seen any programs that have, anti-bullying programs that have had demonstrated success?
Oasis has definitely demonstrated success.
And how do they measure that success?
Just they didn't really go into it, how it measured success on their website that I saw.
Okay, so then how do they say that they're successful, and how do they report that?
I just kind of thought they were because it was a big program and they are well known, and they had a bunch of programs to help prevent further bullying.
Do schools who have those programs in place have lower instances of bullying, or are they on the same level as schools who don't have those programs?
We do not have that statistic.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a question, just thinking about how people got bullied when I was in high school. And sometimes it dealt with things that happened after school hours. Parties on the weekend, people do stuff, and then all of a sudden word spreads around everybody, and then you kind of, these little subtle jokes that get made at school and that constantly happen, that are constantly brought up, somebody's constantly being reminded of something stupid they did, and they start to feel bad about themselves. With regard to that, is there something that, that could be done to kind of say, okay, we've made a mistake, we're not gonna talk about it anymore, let's move on? Is there a way to get people to catch on to that message?
Like outside of school,
Well, because a lot of that's where this stuff takes place. So, I mean,
well, kids who report being bullied for school and stuff, it's only like 9% of the bullying instances are outside of school.
Oh, really? Okay.
Most are in classrooms, hallways, and cafeteria and lunch.
okay.
Do you think that everything that happens outside of school is reported, though?
No.
Not at all.
Is there any kind of, other than school rules, is there any place for government in this issue?
I mean, there's some like legal instances where the government's involved, but I don't know what all the government could do to help
Okay.
stop it.
Well, let me ask this, it's a crime to bully somebody.
I mean, to the point where it's physical, yes.
Okay.
If you're harming someone physically, it can be.
Okay. But like, just emotional bullying or anything like that?
I think if it's severe enough, it is. Say if like emotional, someone commits suicide and keep bullying, then that's a crime.
Okay. Is it an issue, so let's say there was bullying going on here at our school, is that an issue for Mr. Matthews or Detective Hart or both?
I think it's both. I think that, well, first of all, the administration will sit down with the person who's being bullied and gets reported the bullying. And then if a teacher has seen it or has heard about it, they'll talk to them. And then they'll talk with the student who's being accused of bullying. So I think it takes a group of them to truly figure out, if it's like what needs to happen in order for it to stop. And I think, Officer Hart, I know they talked about confiscating like phones if it's cyber-wise, and I think that's when Officer Hart steps in. But I think if it's not as severe, I think it could be just like a Mr. Matthews or Coach Galloway. But I think once it gets to, cyberbullying and it gets too extreme, I think that's when the group gets together